Yes. Welcome to my ramblings on Bulgaria. This time I went and met up with Elena from the Balkani Wildlife Society to chat wolf conservation. Wolf conservation first sort of got on my radar after speaking to the vulture guy from Albania, who was saying that the major threat to vultures is actually the poisoning of wolves.
Not intentionally to poison or to kill the Egyptian vulture, but to kill the large carnivores such as wolf.
So I had to go check this out in the Balkans. So I left the Shire Mountain region of Macedonia and did a long slog over to the west of Bulgaria into a tiny village called Vlahi in the Pirin National Park. The Pirin National Park is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. Its biodiversity is special due to the creation of like 3 different climatic zones all intermixing. You've got high mountains, deep gorges, glacial lakes, which sort of makes this a place of complete universal value. And Vlahi, a tiny little village, the sole inhabitants are Elena and her family, their flock of sheep, the family of Karakashan sheepdogs, 2 rescue bears and 2 rescue wolves, which alongside her large carnivore education centre hope to sort of educate the people and try and persuade them that, you know what, these animals aren't actually that bad. She was telling me that here in Bulgaria now, estimates are uncertain, but they think there's around 800 wolves left. This is a really low population number, but they don't even have a conservation status in Bulgaria. They're just seen as a pest. And this sort of goes from what it's been like historically. In the 19th century, they were essentially just hunted and hunted, thousands getting killed every year. And then during the communist times, the Soviets used to come down in the 50s, 60s and 70s and just used to hunt all the wolves so that there'd be more sort of wild ungulates like deer and boar left for them to hunt. And yeah, luckily nowadays this large-scale persecution has stopped, but that tag still lives on. And the main threats to wolves nowadays is that there actually aren't enough of their prey left. So during the communist times, they must have killed all the wolves so that their prey could live, and now they've killed all the prey so even the wolves can't live anymore. And this, alongside inefficient sort of livestock breeding and livestock management practices, means that the wolves are in severe danger. It's not just the number of wolves which is a huge problem as well, it's also the genetic diversity of them as well. A little bit complicated, but essentially as humans come ever closer to the habitat of the wolves, we bring with us the dogs and the stray dogs. And inevitably these sort of interbreeding cases. And this leads to something which isn't quite a wild wolf, which will sort of stay away from the human populations, but it's not so much a tamed dog that it's safe enough to be around. And the consequence of this can have sort of devastating consequences for how the wolf is perceived, because it's completely different. And so this is a main concern, one of the main concerns for conservationists. And sort of solving both these problems is one of the biggest things for Elena and the Balkani Wildlife Society as a whole. But one of the things that they suffer massively from is lack of funding. And this is a huge problem with a lot of conservation organisations, especially when you talk about research and things like this. But for Elena, she tells me that actually she just can't secure the funding. The government won't grant it to her at all. And even the huge EU life funding which she's applied for, which could be a 6-figure sum in order to help create an amazing management plan for the wolves, they won't sign off. And I was asking her why. And apparently it was because her and her organisation have been quite vocal in the opposition of some large-scale projects in the Pirin National Park and in the nearby Kresna Gorge, which would sort of restrict the economic activity but prevent quite catastrophic environmental effects which these projects would have. And because of this, they just won't grant her funding. They sort of just put a cap on it and say, nope, you do this to us, we'll do it to you. So Elena and her organisation are working what they have. With their own hands, they're building up the large carnivore education centre, trying to sort of get through to these students and educate them on how important these animals are in the entire ecosystem. But what most interested me actually was what they were doing to solve the root cause and try and prevent that inefficiency in managing livestock. In stepped the Karakashan sheepdog, a beautiful, loyal shepherd dog which will protect its flock of sheep or goats with its life. It will protect it from wolves, bears, and as I found out when I tried to walk around the house unaccompanied, people that it doesn't recognise as well. Yeah, I got chased by like 12 of the huge woofers and not a nice experience. But yeah, these dogs are increasingly forgotten about, and pretty much driven to extinction. And so yeah, Elena and her husband decided that that's what they'd do. They'd take it back to a traditional way. So they traipsed around the whole of Bulgaria, tracking down the last of these remaining dogs and sort of breeding them and then handing them out to free to the livestock breeders so that they could once again rule the mountains and protect the flocks. It's a genius idea. And Elena said it's worked brilliantly and completely reduced incidences of sort of human-wildlife conflict in the area. My couple of days up in the mountains has been unbelievable with Elena, doing things I never thought I would do, like feeding wolves and bears. Ridiculous.
Tomatoes for you.
But I also learned a hell of a lot, and it's so amazing to see how passionate someone can still be after 20 years of trying to conserve this wolf. And it was interesting to see the sort of residual effect on people's attitudes from this sort of historical persecution of the wolf. And also how important it can be to look at the sort of genetic diversity as well with biodiversity instead of just numbers. And also how important the traditional knowledge and traditional ways of going about conservation can be from the times where we actually used to live in harmony with our surroundings. So hopefully trying to solve our problem with wolves can also help what brought me here in the first place, to help save the vultures and everything else as well. Everything's sort of interlinked. Interesting, isn't it? It's almost like everything's in the same sort of ecosystem. But yeah, hope you learned something. I definitely did. Check them out, show some support. Ramblings out.